Hello, and welcome to another episode of Containers from the Couch. We have the ECS DAs here with us today. And today is a special episode. We're going to be talking about the ECS February roundup. I have with me, I'll let them each introduce themselves, but we'll start with, I have Maish, Scott, and Nathan. Let's have the newest member actually kick off and introduce himself. Scott, this is your first time on Containers from the Couch.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yes, I'm super excited. Little background about myself. I'm a container enthusiast, Linux enthusiast. Container runtimes are kind of my thing, and container security. So glad to be on the team.
Awesome. Well, we're happy to have you. And I think everyone knows Maish and Nathan, but let's just have a brief recap. Nathan, let's go ahead and have a little intro from you.
Hey, everyone. My name is Nathan. I've been working with the ECS team for a few years now. Started out as a startup engineer, very focused on application development, and realized I like working on that infrastructure, and I like helping people understand how to build infrastructure better and more efficiently. So now I work on the Elastic Container Service team at AWS.
Awesome. And then Maish, you want to do a brief intro?
Sure. My name is Maish Casing, also developer advocate here on the team. Been around here for a couple of almost 2 years. Pretty much interested in anything containers, mostly enterprise stuff with the containers. So it's good to everybody. And I do want to give Scott the shout out for getting up very, very early, because I don't know if you recognized his accent. He's not from kind of our part of the world. You're from somewhere down under, which is a bit early in the morning. So thank you very much for joining us so early.
Scott lives in the future. It's already Tuesday, so it's pretty great.
It is.
We should ask him what's going to happen on Tuesday. I'm just kidding. And everyone, my name is Jessica. I am fairly new to AWS and the ECS team, but I have been on the show before. A little bit about my background is I'm super passionate about containers, about Linux, about open source and DevOps. So I do a little bit in all of those categories. And then, of course, like everyone else on the show, I love community and hanging out with everyone who's watching. So huge shout out to everyone who's watching. I'm sure we have people also from all different time zones. Maish, it's also like nighttime where you are. So thank you for coming in late. All right. So today we're going to kick it off with the roundup, with a recap. We had a lot of announcements in February, like a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got to start out first and foremost talking about the one that was most requested. Almost 2,000 people asking on the container roadmap for task definition deletion. I don't know if y'all have seen the GitHub issue. It got a little heated there. There were some funny comments as well. But yeah, this issue was around for a while, and I don't know. Anybody else want to talk about this? What this exactly does?
Scott actually wrote the blog post out on this and the announcement. He has some handy scripts in the blog post as well. So Scott, why don't you give us a little brief overview of what it is, why it's important, and how it kind of came to be?
Okay. Well, how it came to be was kind of before my time, but let's talk about the where we are now. So basically, what this allows you to do is delete task revisions. So if you have the problem of too many task revisions, or you have a task revision that has secrets stored in it before secrets manager come in, and you want to clean that up, it'll allow you to do so. So basically what you've got to do is just get the task revision number that you want to clean up, mark it as inactive, and then use the delete command. That's available in the CLA and our SDKs now. And there's a bash script with the blog post if you want to loop through and do things. So it just starts with the first number of the task deletion. So say I want to delete number 15 through 20. You put the task family name, you put number 15, and then you put the last number as 20, and it'll just loop through and mark them as inactive and then delete them for you.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's cool because I think when I was reading your blog post, it's just a simple script, right? We have it's a for loop, and we're just looping over and running the same command. And it shows the power of how you can do things very easily to accomplish now deleting a mass number of revisions, which I'm sure if you've been around ECS and you've been doing this a little bit, it'd be nice to go in and have some cleanup jobs. I think we actually have the blog post right here so we can see what we're talking about.
My buddy Mike just did a funny comment on Twitch here. He says, finally, we can delete task definitions without needing to delete an entire AWS account.
Yeah.
So that was a pain point once upon a time. Yeah. Now we fix
But now it's a lot simpler. Yes. Now we don't have to worry about different accounts, and we're able to just loop through and delete that. And that was a big announcement. That was yeah, that was pretty fun.
Yeah, I could provide a little more context on like the history of this. I think when we launched ECS, it was a very difficult problem to solve because we knew we wanted to be able to scale to massive sizes, and that involves a little bit more complexity building a system like ECS than it would with something like Kubernetes, because the ECS control plane is not just serving one cluster for one customer at a time. It's actually serving an entire region, and in order to do that reliably, it's split into different cells, and so certain resources are distributed across cells in the cellular architecture in a very decentralized way, where there's not really like one source of truth, so to speak. And so it turns into a very complex thing because everybody is using the same control plane, and their individual requests and clusters will be distributed to different cells. And then within those cells, you could have different services that are running. You could have standalone tasks that are running off a task definition. So there's all these dependencies on the task definition, and understanding where all of those things are being used in such a way that you don't build strong dependencies between cells. So that way there could be an outage in one availability zone and it brings down everything. That's been sort of the biggest challenge in building this. And so you see we finally sort of implemented this feature here where it's not instantaneous delete call. It is something that a caveat I should call out. Like when you transition a task definition into delete, you'll go into delete in progress. And it can take a little while. I think Scott did some tests on how long it could take in some cases.
It's roughly between 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the load that you pass it. So if you're passing it thousands, it's going to take slightly longer. If you're just doing a couple, it sits there for about 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm. So there's still some more work to be done there. But basically, it's coordinating across all these resources in the region and all these different isolated cells to basically ensure that everything has been cleaned up. There's no more dependencies on that task definition before it then goes ahead and deletes it. So very interesting. Definitely try it out. Let us know what your thoughts are on it. And hopefully it helps some folks clean up their accounts and clean out resources they don't want anymore.
Yeah.
And on the blog post, of course, there was also a GitHub issue that we opened up above and beyond the original one to get your feedback on the next steps that we're going to be doing with this. For example, task definition, lifecycle, how we're going to implement that in the future. We would really like to hear your feedback on that as well.
Yeah, I think that one is super important because if you look at the features we're building, you kind of understand that we're building an understanding of how an ECS task definition is being used by live deployments. Well, the other resource that's in there is your actual container image itself. And so traditionally you would build up maybe a library of 1,000 different revisions of your task definition going back in time, each one linking to a different container image version that you had uploaded. Well, if we're actually deleting the container or the task definition, how do you know which container images were uploaded, whether they are in use? And so we're trying to understand what folks' needs are there in terms of maybe potentially cleaning up container images automatically. Do you want to actually clean out task definitions once they reach a certain age? What your use cases are for cleaning up old resources on your account. So any information you have for us, definitely add that to the container roadmap issues that we're opening on this. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think when you mentioned lifecycle is really a key thing as well. And so having that tie in where, okay, this task definition references this ECR image, and having that like easy cleanup between lifecycle management based on age, based on whatever parameters or requirements you have as a business is definitely helpful. And getting insight on how customers would like to see that feature implemented and have it be accessible is super helpful and super valuable. One of the other announcements, in addition to task definition, was we also had the increase in the number of provisioning tasks quota that allows us to improve the cluster autoscaling. I think, Nathan, you can talk on that.
Yeah, so this one is a little tricky to understand, but I can start by explaining how capacity providers work. So when you want to launch containers, you need capacity. The capacity provider needs to have some understanding of just how much capacity is needed to be launched to run the amount of containers that you want to actually start up. So some of our largest customers, if they're doing a fresh deployment or they're rolling the containers in their service, they might have 1,000 containerized tasks that need to start up or actually restart. So what we built in there was a state where ECS can launch a task. It's sort of a virtual task placeholder into a provisioning state. And the capacity provider hooks in asynchronously a different process, and it looks at your service and sees, oh, I see that there's this many provisioning tasks that are waiting to be launched, and there's no capacity to launch them. Therefore, I need to go ahead and start launching some more capacity into the cluster, more EC2 instances, scale out this ESG to a certain size in order to make room for these tasks to launch. Well, we had initially, due to the way it was implemented, a fairly lower limit. I think it was 300 provisioning tasks at a time. So for folks that had, like, let's say 1,200 tasks to launch, it would actually only be able to launch 300 at a time. So it have to do around 4 rounds of launching additional tasks. Well, we increased that now to 500 provisioning tasks at once. And so that allows the capacity provider to observe a larger chunk of requested tasks, understand there's more demand for capacity, and launch an increased number of EC2 instances at once. So this translates to about, if I remember correctly, about a 20% improvement in the speed of launching additional EC2 instances for these really large workloads.
20% is a huge increase.
Yeah, we're hoping to get it even higher than that as well. That will be coming later this year by allowing there to be even more provisioning tasks at once. So we'll keep you updated on that as we have more further announcements on that.
Awesome. And then I think in addition, so we've talked about task definition deletion, cluster auto scaling. And then we also have ECS has announced a new default console experience. And I think we did a dedicated episode on this, right?
Yes, we did. I was actually the one which was hosting. We had one of our PMs, Sergey, and a lot of who was here also as well, and one of our engineers to explain a deep dive, firstly, why we wanted the new console experience, how it is easy for our users. I'm going to put a link to that in a second in the chat as well, so you can also view it as well. And it has its own dedicated episode, so we're not going to dive into what it is because it's kind of repeating ourselves. We don't really like to do that. It's just a waste of most people's time. You can watch it on your own. But have a look at that episode. Of course, if you want to, please, of course, subscribe to the channel, both to the Twitch channel and, of course, to the YouTube channel as well, so you can get future updates in the future and not miss any of our shows.
Absolutely, yeah.
I do want to call out one thing from that stream that I learned, because I didn't even realize this existed, and I was working with the console team on the design. But there's this new functional cookie that you can turn on in the ECS console, and it will actually remember information about how you want your ECS console to be customized to your needs. So if there's like a particular column in the table that you don't like, you can hide that column, and the functional cookie will remember that. And every time I reload the ECS console, I won't see that column, or it even persists the column widths. So let's say I like to view my screen and my column widths at a certain size. It'll remember that, and it'll restore that same state every time I load up the console. So that was a huge addition to me, and the setting was a little bit buried, so I didn't realize it existed. But now that I know it existed, it's like making my experience so much nicer.
That's pretty cool. My first thought, though, is then be careful in the future and don't delete your cookies. Or export that cookie and try to recreate. I don't know. Try to do something to save that. You get everything tweaked just right, and then you're like, oh, I'm going to go through and do some spring cleaning. Dang it.
Oh, no, I have to fix everything in my console again.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so definitely check out that episode. We've dropped that in the chat. So if you're watching or streaming from wherever you are, you should be able to go check that out as well. One of the other things we also did an episode on that was a big announcement was we talked about Amazon ECS Service Connect, which was first announced in November at reInvent. And it's a different way of allowing service-to-service communication as opposed to more traditional ways with service discovery and DNS-based service-to-service communication. I was trying to figure out a way to not be so redundant. But I actually hosted the episode on that with Alex from the ECN or Elastic Container Networking team, as well as by Bob, who did an amazing demo. We also have a blog post that walks through that. So I know when we're not going to recap and go too deep into the topics because we did already have an episode, and we'll have a link for where you can go check that out. But during that particular episode, I know some users wanted to follow along by running some of the code that Bob was running. We have a whole blog post that does that in depth with some scripts available for you, as well as CloudFormation templates. We even have one-click deploy buttons. And we have a repo there that's based on, so we use a Yelp application that was originally written by Massimo Referee, and we kind of build on top of that. And there's a repo that's in the blog post that there is a known issue with the one-click buttons. Don't worry, we're on it and we are fixing that. But definitely go check that as well if you're looking for different ways to have your service-to-service communication in your ECS cluster. You can now check out Service Connect and you can migrate from Service Discovery without having to make any application changes. It's pretty exciting.
And with zero downtime as well.
And with zero downtime. Yeah. It's pretty exciting. Yep. And you can do that in the, like, we give you a sample app to migrate that Yelp application I mentioned. So you can play with it before you go and do it in your own dev test environments and then ultimately production. But we'd also love feedback on that. If there's something that you really love, we'd love to hear that. And if there's something that you feel is an opportunity for improvement, we'd really love that as well. I know another announcement that we had in February was the monitoring the Amazon ECS agent. That was a big one as well.
Yeah, I thought this one was really interesting because it's so necessary to know like what your infrastructure is doing as an operator. And I thought this was a very creative way to actually monitor it using CloudWatch events. And it walks you through some of the events that you should expect, like some of the behaviors of the ECS agent, such as the fact that it disconnects and reestablishes its connection a few times per hour. Like if you understand what to expect inside of the events, then you know, okay, this is normal. Doesn't mean I'm losing connectivity. It's the ECS agent does this on purpose to make sure that still has a valid connection to the control plane.
Yeah, and I think being able to have that insight, I mean, when I think of, again, I mentioned my background's DevOps. And when I think of all the different parts or aspects of DevOps, one of the last ones that people tend to kind of overlook or not consider, because we're so quick to wanting to iterate and be agile, right? But monitoring is super important. And being able to have that insight, that monitoring, that telemetry helps from both like a planning, so you can figure out what your next sprint is, but it also helps you to be able to be proactive and figure out, hey, this is something that we should address, or this is something I wasn't aware was happening. And being able to actually monitor the ECS agent, I think, is a pretty huge thing from again, observation and metrics monitoring kind of perspective.
And one of the things in that blog post is actually a CloudFormation template that deploys a rule that hooks into EventBridge, where you can start to set up your own conditions for what you want to do when you see a certain event happen. And so some ideas that pop into my mind is, let's say if I'm using like an ECS Anywhere, or I'm using a piece of infrastructure and I see that agent disconnects, and I see that it doesn't reconnect, then maybe I want to send a Slack message, or I want to send some alert being like, check the infrastructure, something is down. your ECS cluster's capacity is not coming back up as expected, or it disappeared. You need to check to make sure those tasks are still running. You need to make sure that there's not some network connectivity issue stopping the control plane from actually being able to talk to your capacity. Conditional,
I don't want to say necessarily notifications, but having conditional control over your monitoring is super powerful. You can get really creative with that, especially like I'm thinking from like a production team, sending a Slack message to a particular team that's responsible for that, posting it on some sort of dashboard, whether you're using Grafana. Having that insight is super, super powerful. So that was an awesome announcement to see. I know another one we had was also, because we're kind of talking about monitoring, we're talking about telemetry. I'm also thinking of like security and different improvements. And we had configuring KMS encryption at rest on ECR repositories with ECR replication also announced. And we have a blog post on that by Sam and Joe. That was another big announcement. Mesh.
So of course,
thoughts on that?
security, in this case, of course, security, of course, is always what we call job zero at AWS. And
Yes.
if you can encrypt something wherever you can, the better it is. And of course, encryption at rest secures your data on the cloud itself. You can encrypt it with your own private keys if you would like, or you bring your own keys in order to encrypt it, not with the default keys which we provide you, which enhances your security posture as well.
Right.
So, and the most important thing, of course, encryption at rest doesn't incur any kind of performance penalty at all. This is pretty much transparent, so there is absolutely no reason why you shouldn't do this. Just to enhance your security posture, make your data in the cloud a lot more secure, and keep yourselves away from bad guys, as we call it.
Right, absolutely. And you can do that with ECR replication as well, which I think is
Correct.
pretty awesome. And they walk you through how you can configure that and how to get started in the blog post. But I think, I mean, you said something that was really powerful is, I mean, obviously security is always job zero on day zero. It's the first thing we think of here at AWS. But I think it's also important because I feel like the industry is finally starting to shift and realize like, hey, security needs to be the first thought, not the last thought after we have everything done.
Exactly.
And this really kind of helps us put it like before your application is ever deployed, once you have your image, you can focus on having security right from the very beginning and making sure that the image you're using is yours, that you're encrypting it with your key, and you have complete control over that. That's really powerful.
Yep.
Any other fun announcements that we wanted to touch on while we have everyone here? Things that anyone on the team was super excited about?
There was something, actually. We had our community meeting with some of the community builders actually last week, later last week, and I learned about some updates to an ECS tool that has been built, and it's called ECS ComposeX. Yeah, so a fun project from community member John Preston. He's built this tool that basically allows you to take your Docker Compose file and deploy it to ECS by turning it into like a conversion between Docker Compose and CloudFormation, and then CloudFormation to deploying on ECS. And so there's a ton of great features built in here. It's actually a very full-featured tool. A lot of times, things start out as sort of I built internally for myself, and it has just the features that I need for my own tool. But he's been working on this one for a few years now, and it's become quite full-featured in terms of logging, scaling, monitoring, Prometheus, FireLens support, alarms. So I've been very impressed and wanted to give it a shout out here. Definitely check this out if you're using Docker Compose locally and you want to have a little bit of help figuring out how to turn that into a CloudFormation template to deploy to the cloud. ECS ComposeX can help you out.
That's a pretty exciting tool. I know for me, like I said, I'm new to ECS. I'm new to AWS. I came from a different cloud provider. So trying to understand how to do containers, and specifically working with ECS as a container orchestrator through CloudFormation or CDK, there's a little bit of a learning curve there, right? And being able to take something that I feel like is pretty industry standard, right? If you're already using Docker and Docker Compose, and I have 34 Docker containers running at home with my various Compose files, being able to take that and quickly figure out how to get that into CFN and then read what I already am familiar with, read that over in CFN, it kind of helps create that little link where I'm understanding the connection. Being able to have a community-driven tool, and I see here it actually already has 10 forks and 83 stars. Being able to have something that's community driven to simplify that experience is super awesome. And
and even just to play around with a feature that you haven't used yet, sometimes figuring out the CloudFormation from scratch is a little bit challenging, but if you have something that can spit out some CloudFormation that maybe isn't perfect, right, for your use case, but it gives you something to start with, which is better than trying to write everything from scratch yourself. I especially like tools that kind of give you a little jump start there, and then you can take over and build your own tool or start hand rolling your own templates and things later on.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, Agile Guru says that this is a godsend, especially for DevOps pipelines. My background, like I said, DevOps, whether it's Jenkins, whether it's GitHub Actions, whether it's Travis CI, you name it, I've done it. And I agree, like being able, I'm a huge proponent of having your IAC as part of your pipeline too, just from disaster recovery perspective, right? If I deploy something, I don't want to get all the way to the end to production and then something's somehow fallen over, been deleted. And being able to have an easy way to have that IAC included and being able to create that, especially like you said, it might not be perfect, but it gives me that boilerplate, that's that starting spot that I can then tweak it and refine it for my specific needs and for my workflow or pipeline. That's super awesome. And I also want to shout out that community project, just because usually when you do start those community driven projects, they're done as passion projects, right? They're not doing it because they work for AWS or ECS. They're doing it because they're trying to simplify and share it with the community. And I think that's also awesome. That's a great example of teamwork and wanting to help simplify and build on the work of others.
Yep.
I'm looking right now.
And for those who are not aware with what community builders are, by the way, there's a program which we have, which is open for, for subscription and registration, and actually closed not so long ago. There's a whole new set of community builders. It's people which are interested in building on AWS. It's a program which you can sign up for if you're accepted based on, I'm not 100% sure exactly what the criteria are, forgive me. But it is a program, community builders look for AWS. It opens up as a regular enrollment period every now and again, I think twice a year. If you are interested and actively involved in building applications and solutions on AWS, so please definitely think of signing up for that for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I see that we're actually getting quite a bit of feedback and comments. I do see one comment here. Any movements to support DAPR on ECS, or is it on the DAPR team side?
I was actually just looking into that right now. So DAPR is distributed. What's the stand for again?
Distributed application something runtime.
Yeah. So basically, it's a framework for building microservices and providing you a little jumpstart for essentially doing the RPC from one service to another. So technically, there's nothing that stops DAPR from working on top of ECS. It's just that we need some better examples out there. And I searched through the issues, and there's people talking about getting it working on top of ECS. It requires a little bit of configuration on the ECS side, like getting the service discovery figured out. Maybe Service Connect is going to make that easier now. But technically, it looks like this framework should be able to work inside ECS, just like it can work inside other orchestrators as well. We don't have any examples at this time, though, and that I've seen. Maybe somebody has made a quick start for ECS at some point that I'm just missing. But that's a good thing for us to look into and see if we can make that a little bit easier. Yeah,
DAPR came out of a project actually at Microsoft. It was an incubation project there. And I'm familiar with actually the DAPR team. And I've spoken at DAPRCon on how to get started with that in production from a Kubernetes perspective. But I love the DAPR team. So I'm happy to kind of play around with that and see what's needed for ECS, because that sounds like a fun project. Definitely now that we have Service Connect that simplifies that. And if there is something, I know Eugene had asked, is if there's something required on the DAPR team side to enhance that, I can absolutely help with that conversation and make that work. Because I know, DAPR right now, it works everywhere. Like the nice thing about DAPR is it's a set of building blocks that simplifies that dev experience. And you can use it even on bare metal, on cloud. Like it doesn't require any extra work. And from a developer perspective, it does streamline the amount of code you would have to write to be able to handle, like you can just if you're using Redis locally, but you want to use Redis in the cloud, you could just simply pop that out because it's a configuration file change. And without having to make any application code changes, you now have it ready for the cloud. And so from a developer perspective, it's definitely a very powerful tool in your building microservices toolbox.
Well, it sounds like you just volunteered yourself in.
I did. I absolutely did. I absolutely did. So Scott has some comments on that too, because we worked on that together.
Yes, that's definitely on you. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, I will take that action item. That'll be
awesome.
Fun. This is a fun hangout. It's not very often that everyone on the ECS team gets to hang out all together.
Sit on the same 4 blocks on the screen.
The same, yeah. We're on the same couch, proverbially, like we would be in the same
Exactly.
room, except people live in the future. So actually, I just realized everyone on this call, other than me, lives in some form of the future, because Nathan's East Coast, Maish, you're in Israel. Scott, you're in Australia, and I'm in California. So all of you are ahead of me.
Okay.
It's pretty great.
The world's still here. Don't worry.
The
Even in
world's
future.
okay. Perfect. I'm
As far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Good to
Yeah.
know.
Tuesday's pretty good.
Tuesday's pretty good. All right. I'll
Can't
keep that in
complain.
mind.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else that we didn't cover? Maish,
Yeah.
Nathan?
Any final community questions that y'all have that we can answer?
If we're already all here, so you might as well bring it on.
I see something that's 12factor.net. I'm not quite sure what that is.
That's probably from the 12-factor application framework of building modern applications, if I remember correctly.
Ah, that's the first I'm seeing of this. Makes a lot of sense. I'm looking at it. They have their
Mike.
12 factors in Roman numerals. Perfect.
Yeah.
Cool.
This is the authoritative manifesto on how to build in 12-factor style.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot. Just to kind of have a brief recap. I mean, there's been a lot of announcements, and we're just in barely the first week of March in 2023. So finally tackling the task deletion, cluster auto-scaling improvements, new console experience, improvement to service communication. Now we're going to enhance that with some DAPR examples, ECS agent monitoring, security, being able to do encryption with KMS on your ECR. We do have a question from Mike, and this I feel like may be a Maish question. When will ECS everywhere launch?
Well, ECS runs everywhere at the moment, anywhere you like. That's what ECS Anywhere is for. But we're not rebranding to ECS Everywhere because we're not. But you can pretty much run ECS Anywhere wherever you would like, be it on-prem, in the cloud, as EC2 instances, in other people's clouds as well, which I've done a couple of times for demo purposes, not in the AWS clouds, just to show that it works. But yes, you can run ECS anywhere you would like. So we pretty much covered that one, I think.
So at some point we need to make a little mini site that's like, here's all the places ECS runs, and have like some pictures of robots and like all kind of cool
ships,
stuff.
Point of sale pieces, some other vendors' clouds. Yeah, that can also be fun.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. Well, we've made Mike a little sad. He wants everywhere, but I feel like anywhere, everywhere, that gets into semantics and grammar.
Yeah, that's
it's
true.
Basically the same thing. All right. So we're just going to, I guess, close up here a little bit. Again, on any of these announcements that we've made, if there's any thoughts, comments, suggestions, improvements, please, find a way to get in touch with any of us, all of us. Our handles on Twitter are on the screen here. And we'd love to be able to have that conversation with you, take that feedback back to the product team. I do see somebody wants us to send the hardware to the moon. Well, that might involve NASA and things that are above our pay grade.
Well,
I don't know if you
do they run inside of Funko Pops? I feel like if anyone has the skill and the ability to run a container inside of a Funko Pop, it is Scott Colton.
Well, I would like to share with you, but it's under NDA. The Funko data center might be coming. Just watch his space.
How much can it cost
Vlad,
to send a Raspberry Pi to the moon?
Right. So we didn't send a Raspberry Pi to the moon, but we did send a snow cone. And if you don't know what a snow cone is a AWS robust disk which you can plug in and transfer data from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world, or into the AWS data center. And we did actually send a snow cone to the moon. So we don't have Raspberry Pis yet, but we do have snow cones.
So no pie, but frozen treats.
Cones. Yeah,
Cones.
frozen treats.
Cones. Yeah, I like it. Somebody now is going to want to read that AWS Outpost terms to figure out if they can send other things to the moon. This is awesome. Everyone on the stream it's been so fun to hang out. We have a great group of people in the comments. Huge shout out to Mike, the man live, Agile Guru. I am Vlad. I probably didn't say that very long enough. Vlad. That's the way to say it. Jake Programming. It's awesome. It's been great. Again, if you want to check out anything that we've talked about today, check out the comments in the stream. You can go back and rewind after this video. And we also have links to everything. So you can check out the blog posts, the repos that are associated with all the blog posts. And again, also, please don't forget, like this is a community effort. So please contribute, whether that's ideas, suggestions, positive feedback. We love it all.
Also negative feedback. We love it all as well.
Also negative feedback, yes. Yes. Two of
Also,
my
this is
favorite
great.
heroes.
Thank you very much.
Oh. All right. Thank you, everyone. Until next time.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you very much.
Bye.